Quick disclaimer, I am not a licensed mental health professional. This discussion is for informational purposes only, and serious struggles with emotional eating, especially as it pertains to binge eating, should be addressed by a qualified professional. With that said, anyone who has a history of obesity requiring a surgical intervention has dealt with or still is dealing with the urge to eat when you're not hungry. So having cravings for certain foods like sugar or starch or even alcohol, some of those comfort foods that is brought on by certain emotional triggers that we encounter. These triggers can be people, places, or things, and the emotions can be mad, sad, or glad. Sometimes maybe it's overwhelm or boredom, and maybe a little bit of all of these together. The mechanism that causes people to reach for food for feel-better effect when they're stressed or depressed is complex, and it involves a combination of physiological and psychological and behavioral factors. But I wanted to talk about some of the key mechanisms that are in play. So first, we're going to understand why we have emotional cravings, right? The first reason is because of the stress response and cortisol. That's a hormone that is raised when we're stressed. And when we experience stress, the body's response is activated, leading to this release of this hormone cortisol, which unfortunately does increase our appetite and leads to cravings for higher calorie comfort foods. This is often referred to as stress eating or emotional eating. The second reason is because of our brain chemistry. Stress and emotions like depression affect the brain's neurotransmitter systems, including serotonin and dopamine. These are our feel-good brain chemicals, and certain foods, especially those that are high in sugar and fat, can temporarily boost mood by influencing these neurotransmitters. Hence, why sugar and starch can be addictive. So as a result, people may turn to foods like this as a way of sort of self-soothing and giving themselves a temporary mood boost. The third reason is habitual behavior. Over time, we make this association with negative emotions and eating, and it can become kind of a habit or learned behavior, so that in the future when we're stressed or sad, we automatically turn to food as a coping mechanism because it's provided some temporary relief in the past. The next reason, number 4, is for psychological comfort, because we know that food is often associated with comfort and pleasure, and it can serve as a distraction from some negative emotions. So eating can provide a sense of emotional comfort and temporary relief of feelings of stress or sadness. And that sort of is related to the next one, which is emotional regulation. It can serve as a way to sort of regulate our emotions. We might use food as a way to numb or distract ourselves from feeling unpleasant emotions, or to create a sense of reward and pleasure, right? Like a reward for a long day. And then there are social and cultural factors, like how we were raised, gatherings that often revolve around food. People might even respond to stress or depression because it's socially acceptable, and it might be kind of a way to cope or bond with others. The next factor is the difference between biological hunger and emotional hunger. Sometimes distinguishing between food hunger and emotional hunger can be challenging. Emotional hunger often comes on pretty suddenly and is accompanied by cravings for specific things, while true hunger develops more gradually and is typically associated with specific food. So it's important to recognize that emotional eating, while it does provide a temporary relief, it doesn't address the underlying causes of the stress and depression in the first place, right? So it can lead to kind of making the wrong food choices and then leading to guilt and further negative emotions that creates this kind of vicious cycle of emotional eating. So I wanted to dive into some strategies to help combat the urge to eat our emotions away. And these will not instantly feel gratifying, such as replacing old habits with new ones, because it takes time. But I'm going to list some things to consider, and you should try all of them just to see which ones resonate with you most. And I'm telling you that with continued practice, you can find that some of these strategies start to become your new default, and that you might even start to consider one of these actions in the future before you actually think about food or emotional eating. So let's dive in. The first strategy we really need to talk about is awareness. We have to become aware of the urge to eat based on emotions, right? So the trick here is to catch yourself when you're starting to feel like the call to the pantry or the or you're starting to like have this intense craving for a certain food, is to stop and say, what is happening right now? What is drawing me to potentially eat? So this is particularly, if you're not physically hungry. So recognize the moments that you're reaching for food as a response to stress or sadness or frustration. The next thing you want to do is you want to write these things down. You want to journal your emotions. You need to jot it down or make some notes about certain specific things like the time of day, surrounding events, people involved when emotional eating tends to strike. And this will help you to develop, identify these patterns and pinpoint specific triggers. For example, you might find that it's always in the afternoon or always after you're coming home from work, right? So the next thing you want to do is you want to develop a list of diversion activities. This means that you want to start a list. You should probably come up with at least 10 things that you can do instead of eating the next time you feel those emotional triggers hit. So these might be things like listening to music, reading a book, taking a warm bath, taking a walk in nature, snuggling with a pet, calling a friend, maybe a personal hobby like painting or crafting, right? So just jot down some list of activities that you consider to be kind of mood boosting and help you. And these should be a list that you can easily access in the future when you feel those triggers coming on, and you can just pull up your list and choose something on there to kind of act as a diversion from eating. You next want to identify and avoid triggers, because once you've identified your triggers, you can work on avoiding them when possible. So what I mean here is if certain situations or people consistently lead to the urge to emotionally eat, you need to start considering how you can limit your exposure or modify your response, right? One of the options in doing this is to take time outs. This means you create a mental space for yourself. So when you feel the urge to eat emotionally or you feel triggered by strong emotions, pause for a moment. Ask yourself if food is the best solution. Usually, the answer is no, and instead you can use this time to think and breathe and reflect on your emotions. Personally, I like to watch a candle flicker with a beat or calming music playing and focus on taking some nice deep breaths. This is something that you can do almost anywhere. You can also use something I call the beverage strategy. So when you're feeling sad, you might opt for a warm, soothing beverage like herbal tea. You can provide comfort without adding extra calories. On the other hand, if you're angry or frustrated, a cold beverage might be the answer to helping you calm down from your emotions. And the coolness of the beverage cup on your hand, if you focus in on that, can also provide you some distractions and just kind of regrounding. The next thing to consider is setting boundaries. This is something that emotional eaters are often not amazing at. So this means that we can't be afraid to set boundaries with others, and it means communicating your needs and letting people know when you require some personal space or some support. It's essential to have your emotional well-being as a priority. So it's okay to put yourself number one when it comes to your emotional health. The next thing I'd like for you to consider is having crucial conversations. Being open and honest and having those conversations with those close to you about your emotional eating challenges. Share what you need from them, and whether it's understanding or empathy or simply someone to talk to during tough times. Maybe it's just simply a hug. I really like the use of what I call transition times. This can be really helpful, especially once you've identified when you are most prone to emotional eating. So, for example, if you find that it's often later in the afternoon when you get home from work, then this is an opportunity to really develop some sort of transition from your work to your home situation. Conversely, you could do the same thing if you have, say, a busy commute to work. So when you get to work, instead of bringing the baggage that you carried from that commute, you can just take a few moments and get yourself centered with some nice deep breaths. Take sort of a mini break and sort of reground yourself so that you're walking into your next transition of home or work in a more clear, calm mental place. Remember, change is going to take time and practice, so be patient and compassionate with yourself throughout this journey. I'm mean, it's perfectly normal to slip up from time to time, but don't let those moments deter you. Just look at them as a learning opportunity and embrace them as an opportunity to grow. And I know that with determination and consistent effort, you can gain control over your emotional eating. And more importantly is to build healthier, more mindful habits that can become your default, so that when you're feeling triggered, you just automatically resort to taking a nice deep breath, maybe flipping on a radio station or some of your favorite playlists. So I hope that helped in just starting to develop some awareness and a few habits that can be easily implemented so that you can start to break the pattern of eating our emotions away.